So a couple things going on today. We are going to side dress. He is going to side dress or applicate. We're going to add liquid fertilizer to the corn. So each one of these knives go in between the rows of corn, and it puts down liquid fertilizer. Right now, what we're doing is kind of just getting things prepped. What happens is there's a roller pump. So as the tires come across the ground, it rolls. There's a chain in there. It rolls that pump, which creates basically the pump for the liquid in this tank, and it runs through this manifold up top and then disperses that chemical out to each one of these shoes. These shoes have what we call a blade, so it goes into the ground. This tube is where the liquid fertilizer comes down through that knife and into the ground. And so what we're doing is we are feeding these corn plants when they need it to continue to grow. What we're also working on is just replacing some of these tubes. Over time, just the fertilizer going down through there will corrode. Just like anything, just like that sprayer hose or that garden hose from this morning that had a leak in it. Just over winter, over time, things get cracks and hoses in it. And this tubing is pretty cheap, and it's just too simple of a task to go through and replace the tubing. And while we're at it, just cleaning up those knives to make sure that it is delivering fertilizer as it's supposed to. You don't want to spend the time, the fuel, and money to pull this across your field to feed the fertilizer to your plants and have something as silly as one of these tubes plugged up. So this is an applicator. What it does is it spreads out, and each one of these knives go in between the rows of corn to deliver fertilizer into the row so that the plant is getting its food that it needs and nutrients. Just like we need food and nutrients, so do plants. There is some controls. This little box here is the controller, and that is just an on-off, and that controls the valve back here at the back, whether we're recirculating the fertilizer back into the tank or if we are dispersing it out through these hoses. So while he works on this, I was tasked with the more important job to see if I can get the radio to work, because it's not working. It hasn't worked for a long time, and well, let's be honest, it's a lot better to be able to listen to a radio than just the noise of a tractor for hours and hours. So I'm going to see if I can't get some power over here to this radio, and then we'll see if it still works. The other thing that he did today before I was able to get here was put this canopy on. This tractor, it's a 185 Allis Chalmers. You can kind of see the number there. It's what we call an open station. The sun is actually really brutal today, and this is just going to help keep some sun off of him. Whenever we're using this tractor in the sun, it'll help keep it off. It's something we should have probably had years and years ago. I don't know. I think it looks, it's a little bit vintage. He's not super thrilled because all they had was John Deere yellow. So here we are with a John Deere yellow on an Allis Chalmers orange tractor. But let's see if we can't get this radio up and running. He gets to drive, I get to walk. we came back up to the barn. It's just not putting out as much fertilizer as we would expect it to. So we wonder if the pump is plugged. So we're gonna open up these valves and just look inside of them. Okay, so we found the culprit. There is a screen right here. It's like a Y screen, Y valve. What happens is that the fertilizer comes from out of the tank through this valve, through this screen, and down into the pump. And then the pump pumps it up to this manifold, which then distributes it back out to those 5 knives. Now, we did replace this hose here, the one that was too short. Everything was flowing after we cleaned that screen out. And you can look to see where we've put fertilizer in the driveway. We're gonna have a hell of a rock growing season, I believe, with all this fertilizer on here. Now, you can kind of see where we had gone earlier, and it was coming out, and I didn't know well enough, and he didn't look. But see how it's just kind of dribble as opposed to this second pass that we did, and significant difference you can see here. Now, what caught his attention was that we had run, while I was talking, he had ran about an acre, and we hadn't really lost any liquid out of that tank. So he thought, hey, I should have at least dropped 50 gallons in this area that I've done. So the question is, don't you hurt the corn by driving across it? And actually on these end rows, we do. You do drive over. Like, that guy's probably not gonna make it. That guy's probably not gonna make it. So there's, it's a gamble. Everything you do, it's a gamble. We gamble in believing that putting on fertilizer outweighs the very small percentage of loss that you have in the field. Now, some other things to keep in mind too, like we had this sprayed. We don't have a sprayer that we use. We have our fertilizer chemical seed dealer. They do that for us. We're looking to buy a sprayer, but we have right now our supplier sprays for us. Now, the good part of that is that they spray for us. They do all the work. They use their equipment. We don't have equipment to do. It's not our time. They do it on our behalf. The terribly negative side, and I think that negative actually outweighs the positive. The negative is that we are very small. We do it. They do it on they do it on their time. The sun's bright. There we go. They do it on their time, not necessarily when we want. Actually, when it comes to soybeans this year, we had paid for a pre-emerge, which is spraying before the plant comes up. So normally it's after you plant and before it comes up. That's when you spray. It kills all of the ground. It preferably happens right after you plant, at least for us. And then it kills all this green, all this grass. You're spraying to keep weed control down, and what that ultimately allows is for the plant to have a stronger chance of growing, getting all of the nutrients of the ground without sharing with weeds and grass until it gets a canopy. The canopy is when the shade, so the leaves from the soybean and or corn plant cover the ground, that there's no sunlight getting to the ground itself. So they're getting the most nutrients out of the ground and not sharing it with a bunch of weeds. That's what's important. Back to my original point, because we're small, we're not high on their food chain. We're not as important as someone who does thousands of acres. We don't get special attention. We don't get priority. We get, I don't know what the opposite of priority is, like dead freaking last. So that's what happens when you don't own your own equipment, but you rely on them. With the pre-emerge, so we had paid or had agreed to a pre-emerge. They were so busy and so far behind that we didn't get pre-emerge. We got post-emerge. So after the crop come up, and not only do we have to change the spray for post-emerge, we also have to deal with how much of the plant, and by plant I mean weed, is established in the ground. So small weeds, small plants, easy to kill because they don't have the established root system. But when you get some of these bigger weeds in here, what happens is it takes more chemical to kill out that same plant. It's all based off of timing. So not only did we get the spray later, we had to use more, which costs more. So our next adventure is probably going to be buying a sprayer for next year and just doing it ourselves. If you've got a good recommendation or someone local who has a sprayer, a good sprayer that falls into our mantra of things that we work with for sale, hit me up, leave a comment of what you guys think we should do. We're going to have to do something for next year and take a little bit more control of our own farming. The other thing you get to is, when they sprayed, this is their tire track from where they sprayed this morning. And they wiped out pretty much an entire row of corn. So maybe some of that will pop back up. A lot of it's beat the crap out of. I want to get a swivel seat bracket to put on these tractors because, well, they came facing forward like any other seat would at that time, and it just makes it a little bit difficult trying to look forward and backwards at the same time while trying to look over your shoulder, simply because you need to be able to see what's going on behind you to make sure everything's working. You need to make sure that you're able to see in front of you. A swivel seat allows you to sit at an angle and be able to look both directions. Okay, well, we got the tank filled up. He's back at it over there. This pretty little John Deere yellow umbrella. He's gonna keep doing that for a while until he gets done. Probably like 30 8 acres today. It's probably his goal. It's not as hot as it was yesterday. He said that umbrella does a fantastic job at keeping the heat off of them, so that's good. That's applicating or side dressing. I don't actually have any clue why they call it side dressing. You should probably Google that. It's probably just a folk term of some sorts. Applicating because you're using a nitrogen applicator to do an application of fertilizer. So he's going to put on that here. We had to make some small adjustments to the pump. He was putting a little bit high, a little bit more per acre than what he really wanted to. Not bad, but we try to follow a standard process as far as how tall the corn is when we put on the nitrogen. It's not an exact science because the weather plays a huge role in it. Last year, the corn was a lot taller before we could get into to actually do that work because the ground was just wet and we couldn't get in without really tearing up and rutting up the ground. So it was later. The corn was a lot taller. It was almost over knee high. This corn's not that tall, but it's ready for a couple things. It's ready for food, or be very close to being ready for food. So the fertilizer, it's going to be very close for wanting some rain. So hopefully within the next week and a half, we get a nice shower here. Everything at that point will have been, everything that we have now is germinated, which means that it has started to grow in the ground. Within a week, you saw that sweet corn. Within the week, you're going to see all of the beans, even what we planted late. I don't have any footage of that, but we planted some soybeans actually the first of this week. They're germinated already. They'll be through the ground by probably mid next week, end of next week for sure. And so after that, after everything's out of the ground, then it'd be nice to get some rain. But we don't control the weather, so we just hope that we get the rain when we need it. We're talking, there's a lot of little projects that we have to do around here, and we're going to keep recording those. We've got that tractor that he's actually applicating with. The alternator, we believe, is bad in it. Well, it's definitely not charging the batteries, so I believe that alternator is bad. So we have to replace that. The soybeans, there's still soybeans left in the bean drill. There's some spots that he is thinking and talking about going over. I was going to clean that out today, but there's some spots that he's talking about replanting with that bean drill. So we're going to leave those in there just so we don't have to refill. But once he's done doing that, we'll clean that drill out. The corn planter, even though all the seed is out of it, it still has some liquid nitrogen in it. So we need to get that chemical out of that planter. We'll get it put back in. Actually, it'll probably just go right into that applicator, and we'll get that out of there, and then we can pressure wash all this stuff and get it cleaned up. And then that would just leave kind of some odds and ends jobs. So there's still a lot of stuff going on here in the spring, even though it's the 1st of June. There's a lot of things going on. We've got a lot of stuff happening on the farm. And before you know it, the sweet corn is going to be waist high. We're going to pay attention to it and watch it. Hopefully sooner than later, that's going to be ready for tassel, come mid-July. And as long as we're getting the rain, we might have to put some water on that, but that's how it goes. Thanks for everyone who continues to watch us and follow along. I'm really appreciative of all that. I don't like to self-promote, but give us a thumbs up if you like what we're doing. Comment down below, subscribe to our channel, and share our page on Facebook. We're gonna keep recording and showing what we do as a family farm here on We Farm with Junk, and sharing our stories and equipment. And we'll get better. I'll get Dad eventually. He'll be worked up to actually want to talk on this channel. We'll get him there and share his stories. a lot of stuff can be learned from him and his generation and his friends that do this farming. And we need to take advantage of that to learn to be able to pass down to our kids and their kids. That's it for me today, guys. Stay safe and have a good rest of your day. Thank you. So this has been like a real interesting thing for me, because like doing these videos, because like anyone who knows me, like the 5 people that I'm friends with, like I'm a super introvert. Like this quarantine thing, perfect. I want to go out in public. Oh, sorry, we can't come to your picnic. The coronavirus really works in my favor. So it's kind of difficult just carte blanche doing videos and like constantly like just taking video. And so I'm standing in the field down by the road and I'm talking earlier, and these cars keep come by and they slow way down and just stare at me like, what is this weirdo doing? And I thought to myself, well, that's why see, hold on, don't turn too much. Okay, sorry, man down. And so it's like they're staring at me. I'm like, this is why I'm an introvert. Like, people just stare. And then I appreciate all the comments on my product reviews, but like I don't know how much I'm cut out for criticism, honestly. Oh well, don't put yourself in a public light if you don't want to be criticized.